Welcome everyone. My name is Fabienne and I'm the new center director here. So I've been really looking forward to tonight for the opportunity to have an informal chat with Venerable Thubten Chodron, interviewed by Vicki MacKenzie. So I think I probably don't need to introduce Venerable Chodron, but nonetheless I will. So I've had the good fortune of knowing Venerable for some years now, where she visited us at the center where I was and taught, and then I subsequently visited her at Shavasti Abbey. So she's the founder of this wonderful abbey in Washington State in the US that has a community of 16 monks and nuns now. And it started in 2003, and so again, she arrived with 2 cats in 2003, and you would never believe it. Going to the abbey now, it's a flourishing monastic community with beautiful building in a stunning landscape, where monastic are supported to learn in what it means to live in the vows and to train. It's a wonderful institution, and it's a major accomplishment. So if you want to find out about the abbey, we've got leaflets outside. But as well as having founded this flourishing abbey and guiding the monastic community, Venerable Chodron is also an author of many books. That's also in the lobby, and we've got a few books that are on sale as well. And on Thursday night, we had this wonderful talk, and where we covered, in particular, amongst the book that she's edited and co-authored and then just wrote herself, is this wonderful series called The Library of Wisdom and Compassion. And it's a multi-volume series, and now volume 4 is about to come out. And it's His Holiness and Venerable Chodron's presentation of the entire Buddhist path. So we're about to have volume 4, and there'll be maybe 8, 9, who knows how many volumes. Anyway, so to find out about that. So anyways, so thank you, Venerable Chodron, for agreeing, for playing with us tonight. And then, of course, Vicki MacKenzie. So I will share, Vicki MacKenzie is one of those people who changed my life, because she wrote this book called Reincarnation, which is Lama Yeshe's biography, and Lama Yeshe is what brought me here in those robes. So thank you for that, forever and ever. So Vicki is a journalist and author. Reincarnation is one of her books. Boy Lama, I think it was renamed maybe Boy Lama.
Subtitle.
And,
Cave in the Snow.
Yeah.
In the Cave in the Snow. The wonderful, wonderful biography of Jetson Palmo. And then I wrote, actually, in your bio, I wrote that you're the first person to publish an interview of His Holiness the Dalai Lama for the Sunday Times.
Yes.
So, yeah, Vicki, thank you for coming.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I hope this is going to be more of a conversation than an interview, which sounds a bit like, the Gestapo or something. So you're not being put under any spotlights here. It's hard to know quite where to begin, because there's quite a lot of ground that Thubten Chodron has covered. And I would just like to say, though, that I am completely in awe of your output and your contribution to the Dharma, which has been going on now for well over 40 years, and your many, many achievements. Thubten Chodron.
Cut the praise.
But Thubten Chodron beat me to the Dharma by 1 year. She arrived in 75 and I arrived in 76 in Kopan. Were you actually in Kopan in 75 or
Yes.
did you just, okay.
Yeah, I went to the Lama's course at Lake Arrowhead, California, the summer of 75.
Oh.
And then I quit my job and went to Kopan for the November course of 75.
Okay. So she's senior to me in many, many, many ways. But I think that without, sort of, don't want to sound arrogant at all, but I think in both our ways we have tried to bring Dharma to the West in the very, very early days when there was really nothing about the Dharma available. There was one little bookshop in, I think actually there was 2 little bookshops in London. One was Watkins in Cecil Court, and there was another one in Camden Town. But they were tiny little places, and you just have to go in there. They were like little treasure troves, and you would find a book on something to do with spirituality. And you were very lucky that there was nothing available at all. And so we were both there at the very forefront, really. Well, not the very, very forefront, but in the very early days of the Lamas coming to the West, and, coming actually out of Tibet, and therefore, being very drawn to them in many ways. So I would like to ask you, unlike me, Thubten Chodron became a nun. So she's devoted her life completely, almost since she met the Dharma, to the robes and a life like that. And I would like to ask you, first of all, why? Why did you take that big step? You were only in your 20s, and I think people would like to know, because it wasn't very common, to find anybody ready to take that big step at those days. There weren't many around, So why did you do it?
Okay. Yes, my parents asked that same question, but in a different tone of voice. And well, the first thing is, why did I become a Buddhist? Because that's the important thing, not the robes. It's why did I become a Buddhist? And it's because when I learned the teachings, they really made sense to me when I thought about them and tried to use reasoning. They made sense. And then when I practiced the meditations that the Lamas taught, and when I really reflected on the teachings, they helped me tremendously with my life, and to really calm down, So, seeing the effect of the teachings, and then not wanting, feeling like the Dharma path was something very precious, and that if I didn't really learn more about it, I would regret it when I died. So that's why I went to Kopan after initially encountering the teachings in California.
Can I just was there anything in particular about the teachings? I mean, for me, it was the death meditation. There was something which really turned my life around radically when I got there. I didn't understand everything the Lamas said, and I didn't accept everything, but I accepted some things very profoundly.
Right.
And I wondered if there's anything that you were really affected by.
The death meditation had a strong effect on me, because I realized, that our life is short, and I wanted it to be meaningful.
Right.
And also what affected me is, before I met the Dharma, I thought I was a pretty nice person. And once I started meditating and looking at my mind, I realized, I'm not so nice. There's anger, there's attachment, there's massive confusion, there's arrogance, there's jealousy. My mind was a mess. And I thought, that combined with the death meditation,
Right.
That I don't want to die with a mind that's a mess. And if I'm going to benefit other living beings, I have to clean up my own mind first, because you have to stop harming others before you can benefit them.
Did you want to benefit others before you met the Dharma?
Yeah. I was always wondering about what's the purpose of my life.
Sure.
I couldn't figure out what it was, but I knew it had something to do with benefiting others.
Uh-huh.
That was very clear.
What did you do before you...
I was a teacher.
Okay.
Because I thought education, what a great way to benefit little sentient beings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But there was nothing in my environment that exposed me to the idea of bodhicitta or great compassion or anything like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. For me, I was amazed that, I was brought up as a Christian, so I had the idea of not benefiting others like that, but actually having some kind of love, let's say, let's love for the wider community. But when I met the Dharma, I saw it in the Lamas, personified.
Yes.
So it wasn't just all a cerebral exercise or a philosophical idea.
Yeah.
It was something which was embodied. But they also gave me methods
to develop it.
And nobody had ever given me any methods. Yes, which I found extremely valuable.
Yeah, because I too, everybody, around Christmas time said, well, all year round, it was love thy neighbor as thyself, but I didn't see anybody who did it.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to do it myself because I thought all these other people were jerks.
Yes.
And how can you love a jerk?
Yes.
Yeah. And so it was the Dharma that made me see, well, actually, these people are not jerks. I'm the jerk. Yeah. And so I need to change my way of thinking.
Right. So it was a profound impact on you in 75.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very strange. If anybody had asked me, like a few years prior to that, if I would ever be a celibate nun or a Buddhist, I would have said, forget it. But then actually within a very short time of meeting the Dharma, I knew I wanted to ordain.
Did you? I didn't.
Yeah.
It didn't happen to me.
Yeah,
but it did for you.
Yeah, it did. And now when I meet people who are new to the Dharma and want to ordain, I'm always a little bit, well, why are you rushing it? Why are you pushing it? And then I realize, oh, well, I was like that.
Right.
Yeah. But Lama, I asked him, I went to Kopan, and I asked him within just a few months if I could ordain.
Did you?
Yeah.
And what did he say?
He said, yes, but wait.
Uh-huh.
I was like, wait, oh, no, I want to do it now. But your teacher tells you to do something, so you follow it. And he made me wait about almost a year and a half, and it was actually very good.
Was it?
Yes, because I had to get things straightened out.
Like what?
Well, I was married.
You were married?
Yes.
Oh, that I didn't know. That I didn't know. But that's a bit of an attachment.
Yeah, you don't remember Bob from...
I don't think I do.
No, I guess we kept it really hidden, huh? Yeah.
Okay. So what happened to Bob?
Bob, he is... Okay. Well, I'm very grateful to him because he also became a Buddhist. So he understood why I wanted to ordain.
Okay.
And he didn't guilt trip me. He didn't try and prevent me. It was painful for him, but he let go.
That's nice.
And so it's a very funny story, but my mother introduced him to somebody that he married. And they have 3 children. And sometimes when I go to California for His Holiness's teachings, then I stay with them. And, he's very, he and his wife are very friendly with my family.
Oh.
Before my parents died, they would go and visit my parents. I was the black sheep in the whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's a Dharma student at TDL in Geshe Gelsen Center.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, can you imagine?
Yeah. So, I mean, did you ever think, I suppose this is what an ordinary person would think, you're a young woman, you have a husband or you have a relationship of some sort, and yet the urge is so strong that you're prepared to give up all that and your hair, which actually is quite a big thing, for women.
I had hair down to here.
Did you? I can't remember that either.
Yeah,
you
it
had
was
a long...
cut off by the time you came.
Okay. So, I mean, it's a lot to give up. So it seems to most outside people. Was it difficult for you? And you have to wear the same gear the whole time.
Yeah, I had to what?
Sorry, wear the same clothes the whole time.
Oh, that was a relief.
Okay.
Yeah, I came from the hippie generation.
Yeah.
So wearing the same clothes, not having to wear makeup, that was the easy part.
Right.
Okay, cutting my hair, that was difficult because I had spent years and years and years growing my hair out. And it finally looked so nice, and I could go like this. And then, I thought, well, when I die, there's a corpse with beautiful hair, but so what?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when I thought about that, then I realized, having beautiful hair is like nothing, worth nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I cut it. The thing about separating from my husband, it wasn't that difficult. I mean, there were some difficulties, but I saw how selfish I was within the relationship. And I saw how selfish, the dynamics in a romantic relationship are.
Like? How?
Well, Lama once said, when somebody says, I love you, they may mean I'm going to use you. In the sense that, you give me happiness, so I love you in return. But if you don't give me happiness, then my love evaporates. So the love is very conditional. And the condition is if you make me happy.
Right.
Yeah, which means if you do things my way, if you give me gifts, if you let me win the arguments.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw it was like, boy, this is really selfish. And I've got to change.
You've just done a talk, I believe, today at the British Library. I think it was on personal fulfillment and a meaningful life. That's if you talk to the subject. And I think my mother said, I was brought up with my mother saying, darling, you will never be fulfilled as a woman unless you have children, which means having a husband. She meant it sincerely, that a woman is fulfilled by having a child. She loved children, and that was her path.
Yeah.
I never really understood it personally, but that I couldn't really get it, that why that would be so. But nevertheless, that is the norm in society.
Yeah, my mom said the same thing.
Right. So how was that ever an issue for you? We're talking about fulfillment here.
I never really was keen to have kids to start with.
Right.
I suppose if I hadn't ordained, eventually because everybody else was having kids, I would have done it. But it was never something that was very important to me.
Right.
Yeah. So giving up having kids was not a problem.
Right.
It was more giving up having one person who was special to me and who I was special to. Yeah?
Yeah. I think that's a very normal yearning.
Yeah. So that part I had to really work on, because I had to learn to deal with my own emotions by myself and not run to somebody else for comfort when somebody else criticized me or when I was unhappy. I had to learn to deal with, to grow up and learn to deal with my own mind myself.
Yes. And I think that we all have a kind of, almost like a kind of unceasing, human beings I'm talking about now, an unceasing kind of wish for closeness.
Yeah.
And a wish for closeness, and it's easier with one person or your family, you know, your spouse, and then we have that kind of yearning for that. And I wondered whether you ever had that, or if not, what has compensated for that feeling as a nun?
Yeah, I was addicted to that. That was my image when I was growing up.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's what they feed little girls.
They do.
That's what they feed us. And it's so harmful and so destructive, I think. You know, feeding you, telling you that you're only worthwhile if a man loves you. What do you mean? Women are worthwhile because they exist, not because a man loves them. Yeah? And you know, I grew up kind of with this feeling of, well, I don't really have a life until I'm married. And that's BS. You know, excuse my French. You know, we are full human beings, intelligent human beings, and we need to follow, you know, our talents and develop our wisdom and contribute instead of, you know, having one mold and people tell you, well, you're not really doing it right unless you fulfill that mold.
What about the fulfillment aspect? How were you fulfilled as a nun?
Okay.
Well, not as a nun, as a woman, you know, as a person,
Yeah, because...
What has replaced that?
Okay, first of all, refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha. And second of all, bodhicitta. Because when you cultivate bodhicitta, you meditate on the kindness of other living beings. And you begin to, or at least I began to realize, wow, I've received a whole lot of kindness in my life. And thus, I can feel close to all these beings.
Okay.
Yeah? And it's not like we're alienated, but they've all been kind to me. So I can, in my heart, really appreciate them for that. And then also, I know something very important about each and every person, which is that they're just like me in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. So then that stops the feeling of not feeling connected or feeling alienated, because you can look into everybody's heart and say, wow, I know the most important thing about that person, and it's the same thing for me.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah?
Yeah. We also learn through Buddhism at the more profound levels, not at the beginning levels, we also learn that we are all interconnected. And I think a lot of the problems of the world today is of society, West as well as East, maybe not so much in the East, but certainly in the West, is alienation. And we are all isolated, and we're all sitting in our little rooms, and there's a kind of a profound loneliness, really, of the human being and of the human spirit. But I think that if we really practiced at more serious levels, and if we ever get that far, we realize that there is really no separation, which takes us on to more profound levels of practices. Interconnectedness really exists, and that there is no separation. And
But we are individual beings.
yes,
So what do you mean by no separation?
I can't, it's mystical. It's at the mystical levels. There is no, we are all, like Lama used to say, Lama Yeshe used to say, oh, I wish you people would develop more, then I wouldn't have to get on aeroplanes and keep coming to see you. You know what I mean? There's such a connection.
Yeah.
That we always think we're individual, isolated physical beings without realizing there's another whole element of connectedness.
Yeah.
Which is why I imagine the yogis can actually exist. I can never understand it personally, because I need to have people around me too much. But in their caves or in their forest huts, you know, they can go for years and years and years and not feel at all distraught or lonely or want to phone up or anything.
Yeah.
Because I think that they're already connected, you know, they have a connectedness.
Yeah, they have that connectedness, and they also relate to all the living beings around them. There may not be people, but there's bugs.
That's true.
You know? And when you think of the kindness of sentient beings, and you think of, here's this mind stream that is caught in a bug's body, and what suffering that is. Yeah, and then you feel compassion for that bug. Yeah, so that, you know, the yogis have, you know, all the living beings around them, the animals and the insects and so on, they relate to. And, you know, human beings too, even though we aren't in the same room.
Yeah.
But one thing you said really reminded me of it one time at Tushita when I saw Sangha Rinpoche.
Yeah.
And Sangha Rinpoche was sitting, you know, on a chair or, you know, a bench or something. And Lama was on the floor looking at Sangha Rinpoche. And the energy between them was like so inseparable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought, what is that energy between them that I could see how close they were? And it was clearly because they had both generated bodhicitta. And it was the bodhicitta and their spiritual realizations that made them so close.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
So, yeah, I have quite a vivid picture in my mind of that.
It's very beautiful. When you first became ordained, people didn't think that there would be much calling for monks and nuns in the West. You know, that it was the Tibetan tradition, but it's been very surprising, I think, how many people, males and females, have ordained. And I personally am terribly grateful to see monks and nuns within, you know, the Western Buddhist world that I inhabit. And do you find that people are grateful for you being a nun, or do you get any kind of criticism or insults even? I don't mean within the monastic. I mean within just general
society.
Yeah, it's the general society. Yeah.
Well, even within the Buddhist community.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I remember when I first went back to the States, you know, I was walking somewhere and somebody went, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. I was like,
Really?
yeah. And I said, no, I'm not Hare Krishna. So I found some people definitely think it's weird. I was walking one time in Singapore and a man was driving by like this. I was afraid he was going to crash the car, but he was staring at me like he had seen a monster or something. Yeah, yeah. Now that His Holiness is better known, there's not so many things that happen. But in the early days, people, we got comments from people on the street. At the same time, people would come up to us and say, do you know the Dalai Lama? Or, you know, can you tell me about rebirth?
Yeah.
So in one way it acted as a magnet that drew people to us.
Okay.
In another way, sometimes people were like, you know, what kind of weirdo is this? I think none of that really bothered me because I understand. People had never seen Western monastics. And I too, the first time I went to my first course, you know, there were men in skirts and women with no hair. And I was going, what's the story here?
Yeah.
So, you know, I understand kind of where those people are coming from. So it doesn't disturb me, those kind of comments or looks. What I find more disturbing is when some of the lay Buddhist teachers say to people, not to me directly, but to people, that monasticism is old-fashioned, it's patriarchal. It's patriarchal. We don't need it nowadays.
I think that's really what I was trying to get. That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah. So, what the people who say this are the Western lay teachers. I don't hear just the common people in the street saying that.
Really? Why?
Yeah.
Why? I wonder why.
I have my theories, but it's probably better I don't say them.
Yes, I mean, in a way, I think it's fantastic that there are people who want to have renunciation, who are brave enough to not buy into society's mores and pushing, you've got to have this, you've got to have a career, you've got to succeed in this, and then you've made it if you've got this, that and the other and done this, that and the other. People who actually feel in their hearts that they're not buying into that there's another way of life and another way of being, you know, which is simplicity and not consumption, you know, all this consumption that we're all completely drowning in and it's destroying us. Consumption, buy, you know. And I think it's fantastic that there are people who want to live simply, purely, keeping vows and keeping discipline, even though it seems on the outside that it's kind of ancient and belonging to another era. I personally think it's absolutely wonderful. So thank you very, very much, everybody who does that. And I know it's very hard for a lot of Sangha in the West because we don't really, as a society, understand the support you need, because we've had Christian monks and nuns, and they're all kind of taken care of by, you know, I don't know who takes care of them, but whether it's the church who takes care of them or the government who takes care of them, but they're given their board and their lodging and everything, they're taken care of. And in Tibet, of course, monastics got sponsors. I mean, it wasn't the monasteries who took care of them. They had to find their own individual sponsors to take care of them, often their family or somebody, didn't they? It was when you know, you became ordained, you're kind of left on your own, really. It's terribly hard life.
They just ordained us, which was wonderful, and I'm eternally grateful. But they weren't going to provide for us physically, even though the Vinaya says when you ordain somebody, you need to do that. But their priorities were the Tibetan monasteries in India and now in Tibet and in Nepal. That was their priority in order to preserve the Dharma.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Westerners, they didn't see as essential to preserving the Dharma and the lineage and the teachings and
They
so
also
on.
thought we were all rich, and therefore, you know, because they were looking to the Westerners to provide for them in India and so forth. So they automatically assumed that all Westerners were loaded.
And
so
we weren't.
no.
We weren't,
No.
but
That's right. So I know it's been extremely hard.
Yeah.
I wonder what you, when I first, well, no, you've now have your abbey, which is a wonderful achievement. And when I saw you, I visited you when I was living in St. Louis, and you were in St. Louis. Do you remember? I came out to your nunnery that you were starting there, and that didn't quite work out, did it?
No.
I mean, that was with nuns, I think, of different traditions, wasn't it?
It was with monks and nuns, and I was working with a Theravada monk and then some Chinese monastics. And we were going to make a place with all three traditions.
That's it.
With both monks and nuns.
Yep.
Very ambitious. And it didn't work.
Yeah.
At least not then.
It didn't work then.
Yeah.
So what do you wish for your present abbey? What is your dream?
I often say that it's a beacon of the Dharma in the world, that it becomes a beacon of the Buddhist teachings for all beings who seek the teachings and seek peace.
Is that because you're training people, or because you want people to go there?
Both.
Okay.
Both, you know. We're training people, and to train people you have to have people who come there.
Okay.
So,
yeah,
it's both
it's
things.
open to the general public?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yes, we have courses and retreats where other people can come. And then many people like to come in between courses and retreats when nothing special is going on.
Yeah.
And just be part of the Abbey schedule and do things with us.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So this brings me on to the second part of what things I wanted to have a chat about, which is that you've been working very excitingly with His Holiness the Dalai Lama on presenting His Holiness's teachings and views of Buddhism in several volumes to Westerners, and I think you're on volume 4, if I'm correct.
4 is coming out the 15th of the month.
Fantastic! Congratulations, so worthwhile. So, well, first of all, what is His Holiness's view on presenting teachings? I think you, if I understood you correctly from the other evening, I think you want to present the teachings of His Holiness and Buddhism and the Four Noble Truths, the Four Truths as seen by the nobles once. Yes, I've understood that now. In a more contemporary.
Yeah.
Am I correct in that? I don't want to be. Yeah, in a more contemporary form.
Yeah.
So what is His Holiness's? I know this is a huge question. If you can put it into 3 well-chosen sentences, I'd be very pleased. What's His Holiness's overriding vision with that aim in mind? What does he want to achieve?
Well, he was very, very clear that he didn't want it to be just another Lamrim.
That's okay.
Okay? And
I just explain, Lamrim, for those of you who don't know, is the step-by-step path to enlightenment, as was expounded very brilliantly, particularly in Tibet.
Yeah.
Through a wisdom wing and a compassion wing, but it was within the Tibetan culture.
Yeah. So he wanted it not, because there's many, many books on the market of the Lamrim. Many of them are short books that are made from the oral teachings of different geshes and teachers. So you have that, and then you have the translations of the Tibetan and Indian philosophical works, where the language is, do you hold the page this way or this way? Because it's equally hard to understand. Okay?
Yep.
So one goal was to try and explain some of these things in terminology and in words that people could understand. Okay? Then another thing His Holiness wanted was that some of the material from the texts that the monks and nuns study in the monasteries, the philosophical texts that go deeply into the teachings, that some of that material be included in the Lamrim. Because right now, the Lamrim is beautiful, but it's such a short summary of this whole vast body of knowledge. And he wanted some of the more challenging concepts to really be explained in there. Okay? Mm-hmm. So, for example, in the chapter about refuge, we have teachings from Uttara Tantra, Gyur Lama. Uh-huh. Yeah. We have teachings from Pramnavartaka, Dharmakirti's texts. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Gyur Lama was written by Maitreya with a commentary by a Sangha, And so that was one thing, he wanted that material included so that it was a more extensive and deeper explanation of the fundamental points.
Right.
Okay? So he wanted that. And then he wanted material from the other Buddhist traditions included.
Why was that?
Well, he said because he wants Buddhists from the different traditions to be closer to each other. And he said that because he goes to a lot of interfaith things, and he says he has very good relationships with Christians and Jews and Muslims, but not so much with the other Buddhists because they don't get together as much. And because, he didn't say this is my thought, because different stereotypes about the different traditions have been passed down, in the absence of actual direct contact.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So there's certain misunderstandings. Okay? For example, the Tibetans think that all the people in Theravada, they're selfish because they don't want to attain full awakening to benefit sentient beings. And they think the Chinese do all blank-minded meditation, which is useless. The Theravadas think that the Tibetans aren't even Buddhists because they practice Tantra and the Mahayana scriptures aren't the words of the Buddha. The Chinese think the Tibetans are, they do magic.
Yes.
Yeah, because they're always doing these different rituals and ceremonies. So they do magic and fortune telling. Yeah, the Theravadas think the Chinese, well, again, they're Mahayana, so they follow wrong scriptures. And the Chinese too think the Theravadas are selfish.
Yeah.
And as Westerners, I think we're quite fortunate because we get to meet people from all the traditions and we get to read books and go to teachings from all the different traditions. And when you do that, you see, what are these people talking about? These preconceptions are so wrong, totally wrong. Yeah, and so I think His Holiness wanted to clear a lot of that up, so that people could really come together, he said, and speak in one voice about issues that are important to the world, like climate change and poverty and so on.
Right, that's excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember reading, it struck a chord with me, and is that Buddhism, the Buddha started off in India, and wherever it went, Buddhism is such a kind of malleable thing because it's to do with the mind and consciousness, which is non-material. So whichever country it went to, it took on the qualities and the culture of the wherever it was that it went to, because that's the nature of Buddhism. It can do that, you know. It's not in itself rigid. It's very, very, very flexible. And also, you know, the images, the Buddha in the Chinese Buddha looks Chinese, and so forth, and so the Burmese, you know, looks Burmese, and so forth and so on. And when I was doing this interview with His Holiness back in the early 80s for the Sunday Times, and I really just met Buddhism, and I went there as a journalist. He didn't know I was a Buddhist. Well, I was trying to be a Buddhist still. But I went there as a joke. It was terribly unnerving, incidentally. Oh, very, very unnerving. I sat there. Anyway, and I said to him, you know, Your Holiness, you know, Buddhism has got so much, because I'd been in Kopan and I'd been reading and studying a bit, Buddhism has got so much to offer to the West. I said, but it's covered in all this cultural packaging. Yeah. Inside there's this incredible precious jewel. And as a journalist, I knew, because my antennae were honed to this, and I knew it would be very attractive to Westerners. I knew it had things that West desperately wanted and needed. I said, but you know, it's got this precious jewel, but it's encrusted with all the cultural packaging, in which it's, in this case, Tibetan Buddhism. I said, I said, and it's not applicable really to the West because it's off-putting. We don't understand it, we don't know it, we're not familiar with it, we think it's weird.
Or can I interrupt? We think it's exotic.
Well, that's the nice bit. The exotic bit is the nice bit. Yeah. It's the bit which is off-putting, you know, which is the bowing and the, you know, and all and the images which were very alien. And I said, what can be done? And he said, you just need to take the essence. Take the essence. And I thought, this is wonderful. Yeah. And so it's a very interesting transition coming to the West with this precious jewel that the Tibetans have in their culture, which they'd kept on ice for centuries and centuries, and suddenly it was burst out into the West. And it was something wonderful, but it was packaged in this different way. And I think it's a great challenge for Westerners, and I'm not talking about people like yourself who's adopted and gone completely into the Tibetan. I beg your pardon, I've said something wrong here. No, but for the ordinary person in the street, we've got to get past a lot of the cultural stuff.
Yeah.
So, are your books getting past the cultural stuff?
I hope so.
Right.
A lot of the material is, it takes some effort and rigor to really sit and think about it. Mm-hmm. So that material has nothing to do with culture.
Right.
But my concern is, will people put in the effort to really try to understand it? Yeah, because the one volume Lamrims, those are not too difficult to understand.
Yeah.
Once you start getting the other explanations, you have to put your thinking cap on. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it requires energy. I mean, following the path, the lamas are always telling us, It requires energy and effort on our path, our part. It's not quick, cheap, and easy.
No.
So that's the thing. Will people put forth that effort, or will they say, I want quick, cheap, and easy? But when you want quick, cheap, and easy, you get quick, cheap, and easy.
Yeah.
And you don't get the depth and the profundity of what's going on.
Which is so invaluable.
Yeah, the preciousness
of it.
Yeah.
Very, very much so. I mean, there's a great wave of, as I'm sure you are more familiar with than most, of secular Buddhism. And I heard from Tenzin Pomo, she was at a conference, you might have been there too, it was in the States, there were lots of Buddhists there. And they said, well, who believes in reincarnation? And 3/4 of them, only a quarter of
Buddhist teachers.
Buddhist teachers, that's right. She was so shocked, and so was I.
Yeah.
You were there.
At least, I don't know if it was the same one Jetsunma went to.
Yeah.
But I was at one of Western Buddhist teachers.
Yeah, that was it.
And at least half of them, when the question was asked, do you believe in reincarnation? Half of them said either no or they weren't sure.
That's right.
And I was shocked.
Yeah. And they could, because it kind of refutes the second truth.
Yeah.
The causes of unhappiness.
Yeah,
And so
I mean, it refutes all four.
It refutes all four of the
actually.
Buddha's teachings, of Buddha's main pillars of teachings. Yeah.
And it's basically, when we have a very strong idea about something, unless we start to doubt that idea, we can't take in any new information.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's happening with some of the people. Either they were raised with the idea of a creator God and one lifetime and a permanent soul, or maybe they just felt uncomfortable with the idea of rebirth, and they want something that matched their own ideas and made them feel comfortable. But the purpose of a spiritual path that's actually going to lead you to realizations isn't to make us comfortable in our old beliefs. Because our old beliefs are part of the reason why we're stuck in samsara. Yeah? So refusing to challenge our old beliefs, we're not going to be able to go on to really understand what the Buddha said, because we're saying, I want the Dharma explained in this way.
Yeah.
So it's the student dictating to the Buddha how the Buddha should explain. Like, Buddha, don't teach rebirth because it doesn't go in our culture and it makes me feel weird. And, I'd much rather believe in a creator God and have a permanent soul. But I like hearing about love. So teach me that, but all the rest of this stuff.
But I think it's very curious that these teachers, because Buddhism is really all to do with the mind.
Yeah.
What is mind? What is mind? What is mind? And we know, basic Buddhism, that mind has different levels. And that mind, I find this so interesting, that mind is now such a subject, beginning to be a subject of interest even to scientists, and neuroscientists and neurosurgeons. Have you seen the clip in YouTube about this neuroscientist who had an
Oh yes,
Eben Alexander.
Yeah, I heard him speak one time at my tripa.
Well, I think that was very interesting, because do have a look at it. It's he is a very eminent neurosurgeon, and comes from a long line of neurosurgeons and neuroscientists. and he contracted this extremely, extremely rare brain virus. And he died, seriously died.
Yeah.
And he had this extraordinary near-death experience where the part of his brain which is meant to kind of convey images, I can't remember the details exactly, but the images and everything, that was dead, that was gone.
Mm-hmm.
So when he recovered, and his colleagues were just amazed because they think that consciousness is an epiphenomenon of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't really understand Buddhism unless you understand what consciousness is in all its different layers of subtlety.
Yeah.
And how our mind creates its reality.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if you're going to be teaching this sort of stuff in your abbey.
You bet.
Oh, great.
You bet.
Yeah.
I mean, I really emphasize that.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh, give me a for instance.
Yeah. Well, the way I mean, we talk about rebirth all the time and the reasoning that lies behind proving rebirth.
Yeah.
Yeah. We talk about how the mind operates, how it functions. We have teachings that refute the idea of a permanent soul using logic and reasoning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is a big thing. We're not Dharma light at the Abbey.
No.
Yeah.
No.
We're
But
not.
you're incorporating very modern, contemporary understandings of the mind as well? Or research into it?
We don't do a lot of science stuff.
No.
You
No, I
know?
meant quantum stuff.
Quantum?
Oh no, don't ask me, I don't really understand
Yeah.
it myself. But
Yeah. I mean, no, we just recognize that there's a dialogue going back and forth.
Yeah.
And once in a while, we'll read something that explains a little bit of the dialogue, but we don't go into that in big depth.
Right.
Yeah, because I think it's wonderful the scientists are questioning what mind is.
Yeah.
But I don't need the scientists to validate Buddhism.
No, I agree.
Yeah?
Yeah. I love the Dalai Lama when he said, maybe it's consciousness that creates brain.
Yes.
Have you thought about that? He said to the scientists at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we adopt certain parts of modern culture,
Yeah.
but like I said, we don't need science to validate Buddhism or validate any of the teachings. What we incorporate from Western culture is, first of all, gender equality. Yeah, which is a big thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a subject dear to my heart.
Yes. Yeah. So we talk about that. We do a lot
In what context do you do gender equality?
Well, there's many contexts. If we're talking about social issues, we'll talk about how women don't receive equal pay for doing the same job as a man does.
This is in your abbey?
No, we don't pay anybody.
No. You talk about these things within yes.
Because people ask us questions about the problems in society.
Yeah.
And we have to be able to, respond to them.
Sure.
So they may say, well, what do you think about the fact that certain jobs women do the same work as men and they don't get paid the same thing?
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we can't sit there and go, we have to say something.
Mm.
Yeah. Or, we do a lot of things with social issues.
Mm.
Poverty, climate change. We have a whole prison project and working with inmates.
Are you?
Yeah. And many different kind of social welfare things. We're on, some of the nuns are on the board of a local charity for homeless teens.
Gosh.
Yeah.
It's very far-reaching.
Yeah. So we try to really apply the Dharma to societal problems, but at the same time really maintain ourselves as a monastery.
Yeah.
Because it gets very easy. You know, we are receiving so many requests now that we could be gone many different places to engage in many different social projects.
Right.
But then it takes a toll on our community life and our spiritual practice.
Sure.
So we're at a point now where we're learning to say, we really love what you people are doing, but we can't come.
Yeah.
You know?
Sure.
Because it takes us a whole day to go there and then to speak for 15 minutes and come back, and you know, we can't do. But we go to as many as we can.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, you're bringing to mind when Mother Teresa won her Nobel Prize. Mm-hmm. I was sent to live with the Mothers, Sisters of Charity here in London.
I should interview you. You've had a wonderful life.
Well, it's so have you. But it was very interesting, I mean, because they really did live. They went out, as you know, but they spent every morning not going out in contemplation and prayer in order to build up their batteries. Mm-hmm. To go out to these, I've never been to places like that before in my life. So, but it was that desperate, the balance between the two, which was so important.
Yeah, and you need that.
Yeah.
You need that. And I think that's, for people who are activists, it's so important to have a spiritual practice and to really do that practice daily.
I think you need it, don't you? You could be even nurses, doctors.
Yeah.
They're always giving out, social workers, they're always giving out. They're not filling up at all, are they? Yeah. That's right. So when I went to my that first Copan course in 76, as I say, there were things that rang a bell immediately, which I thought I would go home and just think about. I thought that would be it. Just one course, I'll just go home. That's very interesting. I'll go home and think. And there was other things which I just didn't agree with at all. So I just thought they were ridiculous.
Like
and so
what?
Karma. I could not get karma. It took me years and years and years to get karma because I couldn't understand. I just couldn't accept. I put it on the back burner. I thought I couldn't understand, let's say, why a 3-year-old who drowned in a swimming pool, it was their karma. I just thought that was so absurd, as to tell me that. Now I have much more, because I've understood continuity and cause and effect.
Right.
And I think this is one of the really tricky aspects when you, in Buddhism coming particularly to the West. And I wonder how you have tackled things like that within your teaching and your books.
Okay, karma or the whole thing of continuity of consciousness?
Well, otherwise it doesn't. If you just take it, it's random, and this 3-year-old has died or whatever,
Yeah, but when you see, to me, one of the beauties of Buddhism is His Holiness once said, if Buddhism had a slogan, it would be dependent arising.
Yeah.
Yeah, that everything arises dependent on other things, at least the things that are produced. So if you look at the mind, the mind functions, it changes, it has causes, it has effects. Yeah, so it must have causes and effects, otherwise it wouldn't change. Without causes and conditions influencing it, something could not change.
Yeah.
So, and something could not arise either. So if we take one moment of mind, like this moment of mind, what was the chief cause, we call it the substantial cause, that transformed into that moment of mind? It was the previous moment of mind, the previous moment of clarity and cognizance. And what was the cause of that moment of mind? Well, the previous moment of clarity and cognizance. And so, like this, you can trace the continuity of the mind back, into times when, we can't remember, at least I can't remember being 1 or 2 years old, but I know I had a mind then because I can look at other beings who are that old and, they have minds. And then, well, at birth, where did that moment of mind come from? Well, the moment of mind that was in the fetus, in the womb. And you go back to the time of conception, when the consciousness joined the fertilized egg. Where did that moment of mind come from? It couldn't appear out of nowhere, because things that arise and change have causes. And the only thing you can point to as the cause of the consciousness is the previous moment of consciousness, before it entered into this body. And so then you establish previous lives and previous existences. Yeah? And so, when the Lamas taught that I really thought about that, and I thought, that makes sense.
It's logical.
Yeah, it's logical, because I could never buy the thing, first of all, that the stork brought the baby, and I couldn't buy it that consciousness arose out of nothing. And it didn't make sense that the consciousness came from the brain either. Because the brain, you put a brain out there, it's some gob of vegetable goo. And how is that thing going to create experience and cognition and perception and feeling, So when they were saying it, the previous moment of mind, it was like, of course, that's it.
Oh, you were quicker than me.
Well, I thought about it a long time. It wasn't like hallelujah, I understood it all at once.
Yeah.
It took some time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it made sense. So, okay, how does that 3-year-old experience suffering? Well, from something that they did in a previous life. Yeah. That doesn't mean they deserve to suffer. No one deserves to suffer. But the cause had been created. The cause had not been destroyed. So causes and conditions came together. It ripened into the result.
That's excellent.
Yeah. But it's a good, you think about those things and then you think, oh, well, what kind of karma am I creating now?
Sure.
Yeah, because the Tibetans have a saying, if you want to know your previous life, look at your present body. If you want to know your next life, look at your present mind. Yeah, so if we want to know our next life, we have to look at our present mind. And what are our intentions? What are our motivations? Because it's our mind that makes us speak and move. So the mind is the source of the verbal and physical activities.
Sure.
Yeah, so what's going on in our mind? Yeah, and when you start to look at what's going on in your mind, at least I found it was a competition between a horror show and a circus. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of boredom. I got very bored with my mind. Repetition. So, are you fulfilled? Talking about personal fulfillment as you were, are you fulfilled?
I feel like I've had an extraordinary life.
Yeah.
And that I'm so grateful for the opportunities I've had in my life.
Yeah.
And, I'd like to be further along on the path than I am, because I don't have any realizations. But what is fulfilling is I have a direction, and I know that going in that direction is long-term, but it's the most meaningful thing I can do. And so just knowing that I'm doing something meaningful, to me, is what banishes all the existential angst.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah. It's like I'd like to really understand emptiness and bodhicitta and everything much better, but okay, at least I found the path.
Yeah. That's,
Yeah.
And yes, maybe having a meaningful life is more important than having happiness. You know, so it's such a catchphrase, how to be happy, everybody wants to be happy.
Yeah.
But maybe having a meaningful life
Yeah.
is more fulfilling.
Maybe having a meaningful life is happiness.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not the kind of leaping up in the air and clicking your heels together.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. But it's...
Yeah, because I think we have to question what is happiness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Having a meaningful life, yes. Shall we ask if there's any questions?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, you said...
Use the mic.
Hi. If I heard well, you
I
said...
don't think it's on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it on? Hello? Okay.
Oh, you need to hold it
Yeah, okay.
close.
If I heard you well, you said consciousness doesn't come out of nothing.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Put it up to your mouth.
Okay. Do you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and maybe somebody can turn the volume up
Okay.
too.
If I heard you well, you said consciousness does not come out of nothing.
Consciousness is... I'm sorry, I have hearing aids.
Doesn't come out of nothing.
Right, yes, I did say that.
What do you mean?
I mean that you can't have nothing and have something appear without any causes. Yeah?
So the second question is, where does the consciousness come from?
That's what I said, that the previous moment of consciousness. The previous moment of consciousness was the substantial cause for the next moment of consciousness. Now, if you're asking, was there a very beginning to mind? That's your question.
Yes.
There was no beginning. What? There has to be a beginning. Who said there had to be a beginning? Who said there had to be a beginning? When you study math, and you look at the number line, is there a beginning to the negative numbers? Is there an end to the positive numbers? You always can add one more. Okay? So it's this. So the problem is, we grasp an idea that, oh, there has to be a beginning. Why? Because in the beginning, God did this and this. But we're talking about Buddhism. We're not talking about God. Yeah? And in Buddhism, there's no beginning, either physically or mentally, to anything, because everything depends on causes and conditions. Okay? Okay.
Maybe just a quick one. You mentioned about your delight in finding the Buddha Dharma. How did you actually go to that first teachings? Because sometimes there's some curious connections that draw you to something, you know, right at the very beginning.
What made me go to the Buddhist teachings?
The very first one, you know.
The very first one. Okay, well, prior to encountering Tibetan Buddhism, you know, I had been to Nepal and India, and in Nepal, I was trekking, and we went up. The furthest point on our trek was a village where the person who would become my teacher years later was born. Just coincidentally. So I saw Tommy, where Rinpoche was born.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we trekked up there,
No.
you know, and And when I saw all the Buddhist things, when we came back down to Kathmandu, they sell all these Buddhist things, and I really was attracted to the art, to these rice prints, and so we got a few of those and hung them all over our flat. And I had no idea what they meant, but I liked them. And then I saw a flyer in Bodhi Tree Bookstore, those of you familiar with Los Angeles, and it was advertising a course come retreat for 3 weeks with these 2 Tibetan Lamas. But before the course, there was one nun who was going to be giving a slideshow, and then Lama Yeshe was going to be giving a talk. So, I'm always interested in different cultures, different beliefs. I had traveled for 1.5 years all across Europe, into the Soviet bloc at that time, across northern Africa, into Israel, and then we had gone overland from Turkey, overland to India and Nepal. So I love studying cultures, different things, different people. So I went, and this nun was showing pictures and stuff like this. And I thought, oh, that's really cool, Maybe I should sign up for this retreat, because I wasn't working, I was a teacher, and it was summer vacation. Excuse me. So I went to the course, and that was it. Crazy, isn't it?
Previous life imprints.
It must be. It's the only thing that can account for it. Because as my parents remind me, there is not one Buddhist in my genealogy. Yeah, it's not genetic.
I've got another question. What was it like working or being with His Holiness the Dalai Lama? Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, you've been probably talking all day, haven't you? Yeah.
I'll just continue to cough. Sorry that you have to listen to it through this. Can you translate that?
Sorry?
Can you translate that?
What
I'm
did you
answering your question. No, I'm joking. Is there a cough drop?
Oh,
That might help.
I've got a peppermint, not a cough drop. I can say what it was like with me working with His Holiness,
Yes, I'd love to.
if it gives you a break.
Yes.
Well, I've interviewed His Holiness three times, I think, and the first time was in the Dean of Westminster's office. Here comes Emma with a peppermint, and
Thank you.
although I was very, very used to interviewing and being with dignitaries and celebrities and everything, but I was uncommonly nervous. And he made me even more nervous when I went in by insisting I sit on the comfortable chair and him sitting on the other chair, which threw me completely. And he was just so, you really feel as though you're in the presence of the presence. And the photographer, who knew nothing about Buddhism, was completely, as all photographers are, because they look through the lens. And so they see something that, they see differently. He was completely blown away. Anyway, I was given 45 minutes, and I had questions for 45 minutes. A lot of them were political, as well as other things, because it was the Sunday Times, about him going back. And I was weaving in about things like, do you think you're Chenrezig, and things like that. And all sorts of, really sort of important questions to ask him. In which, he answered that one by saying, oh no, the usual, I'm just a simple Buddhist man. I said, no. I said, but your people really do think you are the emanation of the Buddha of compassion. And he gave me this amazing answer, which was, yes, it's true. They do think they do hold me in this esteem. He said, for myself, he said, I can only tell you, I have some connection, and I am sincere. Perfect answer. I am sincere. And so we got to the end of my 45 minutes worth of questions, and all his minders were doing this, he had the next appointment. And he kept saying yes, and then, and next, and next. And I'd run out of questions because, normally when you go to interview really important people, their time is so precious.
Yeah.
And so then I was thrown. And so then I had to kind of ad lib. It was really embarrassing. And I got more and more, and he just carried on like that. But when I interviewed him in Dharamsala, I was very impressed. The fact that he really did treat everyone. Like, the guard outside the door, the person who was looking after his roses, people who were lining up, all the same. He was completely himself all the time. So anyway, now you've stopped coughing, maybe you can you can take over. How was it? Yeah. Were you nervous or?
No, I wasn't nervous around His Holiness. There were usually he would invite. Sometimes his brother came, or Samdang Rinpoche came, or he would call in a couple of other geshes who were there. So there was kind of a Tibetan contingent.
Okay.
And actually, the first few interviews I had with him, there was just me and the translator. But then later on, he started calling more people in. But I felt like, in the Heart Sutra, Shariputra asked this question.
Yeah.
And then Avalokiteshvara, blessed by the Buddha, gives this incredible, profound answer.
Yeah.
And everybody rejoices, but we don't know what happened to Shariputra afterwards.
Yeah.
So sometimes I would ask my questions, and I never managed to learn Tibetan. I know a few vocabulary words here and there, but I can't understand Tibetan. And so then His Holiness would put the question to the geshis, maybe two geshis and Sangdam Rinpoche or his brother, Nari Rinpoche. And they would talk and discuss and debate back and forth. And I'm looking at the translator like, hey, come on, tell me something.
Yeah.
And the translator's just listening to their whole thing. And they go on and on and on and on. And then at the end, I get a short explanation.
So you were forgotten, because the translator was involved in the debate.
Right, and they weren't going to stop their debate to translate. So often I had to talk to the translator afterwards,
Sure.
and then ask things,
Yeah.
or we recorded the whole thing. And sometimes His Holiness would start to speak in English, or no, the translator would start to speak in English, and then His Holiness would think of something else and interrupt, and so I got half of a point.
Right.
And so, really
Lengthy process.
Yeah. And had to go through things with the translator afterwards, most of the time. And then sometimes His Holiness would speak in English too. And
were you recording?
Yeah, everything's recorded. So I have a dream that one day, we can get it all translated. But one of the recordings, I remember I sent to somebody who could translate, and it was just, that person was flabbergasted. They couldn't translate the whole debate because this one says and that one says, and they're interrupting each other, and you don't know what's going on. Yeah. Anyway, so I would ask this question, and they would go, and I would sit there, And I felt like, on a good day, I felt like Shariputra, because at least I asked a good question. But how much I understood, I don't know. So then, really having to go over it again and again.
Wonderful experience.
Yeah. And very humbling. Yeah. And to see the brilliance of His Holiness's mind. Because some of the questions, he would give an answer that he has this ability to take points from many different topics and weave them together to show how they relate to each other.
Wow.
And so I would see this sometime, pulling things out and weaving them. And it was like, wow, I never thought of how those points are related.
Incredible.
And look, I mean, he's brilliant. He has a brilliant mind that way. Yeah. And then, of course, so compassionate, his compassion.
We haven't talked about that.
Yeah. And occasionally he'd scold me.
Would he?
Yes.
How?
One time, I asked a question about something that I had heard him speak about, but I hadn't really understood. It was mushy. And I asked the question, and he looked at me and he said, "You've heard me explain that in teachings." Okay. I'll think about it some more.
Yeah.
Try and understand what I've heard so far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
But also, I mean, very kind in the sense of sometimes asking the different geshis to work with me to answer different questions and settle different points. And then other times him giving his own personal view on different philosophical matters. And especially one of the areas where he was so brilliant and his help so precious was when I asked about the relationship between the spiritual mentor and the disciple. And all this stuff you hear about, you have to see the guru as Buddha, and if you don't, then, choose your hell realm, because that's where you're going. And, and we talked at length about this. And it's in this volume, in The Foundation of Buddhist Practice. There's 2 chapters there.
Really?
Where His Holiness explains the usual way it's described by J. Rinpoche. Yeah. And then he adds how he worked with it in his own life and what he thinks it means. Okay. But he's so practical. Yeah.
Common sense.
Yeah, it's common sense. So he doesn't get you confused, and there's none of this stuff about if you don't believe it, you're going to the hell realm.
There isn't.
No. Not the way, I mean, if you criticize your teacher and you lambast your teacher and you're really rude and disgusting, clearly, you're not creating good karma.
Yeah.
Especially regarding the one person who's the kindest to you in the world, the person who taught you the Dharma. Yeah. But aside from those kind of things, when there's, if your teacher says something that doesn't accord with the Buddhist teachings, you're free to comment on it. Mm-hmm. Yeah? Or if your teacher asks you to do something that you don't feel comfortable doing, you explain why and you excuse yourself. And Jesong Kappa says this, and His Holiness, was really following that view and explaining it. Mm-hmm. So extremely helpful.
Very helpful. Wonderful experience.
Yeah. It was, but I felt so often like I was so obscured that I couldn't really take advantage of the whole experience. Mm-hmm. It was like, I hope these seeds are getting planted in my mind and that sometime later I have fewer obscurations And then at that time, maybe I could understand what he said and what he was communicating.
Fantastic. That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
because he's quite extraordinary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he is. He really is. Yes. You've probably had enough by now.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, there's one
More
question.
questions? Yeah.
Vicky asked you some time ago, earlier on in your talks together, about how it was for you following the traditions of the Buddhist traditions. And the look on your face suggested that maybe you thought otherwise, and I'd be interested to know how you've dealt with some of the more difficult things. And which ones you rebelled against, if that's not too strong a word.
He didn't have to ask me because I told him in the questions that I asked. You know, because I gathered together a lot of questions that I had and that my other Western or non-Tibetan friends had about the things that were sticky points for us. And those were the very things that I asked him questions about. And as we were discussing it, you know, I would, have to explain why this was a sticky point. So, yeah, he heard it.
Oh, thanks. I just wanted to ask about your thoughts about gender and pursuing the Dharma. I was thinking about actually an excerpt from your film about Came from the Snow, when Tenzin Palmo was talking to the Dalai Lama about, the fact that not much progress had been made in terms of, equality of opportunities. And this was some years ago, and, and Tenzin Palmo was really sort of getting into the Dalai Lama about this, saying, what's going on? And he was explaining how difficult it was, even as the head of Buddhism in Tibet, and to bring all of the different lineages and together, and a sense of his sort of disempowerment to do anything practical in moving things along on gender lines. And I just wonder, 15 years or however long on from the film, how you feel opportunities are both in the West and the East for practitioners of both genders too. Yeah.
Oh, that's a
big
whole
question.
other talk,
Appreciate it.
I need to come back and give a whole talk on that. Tenzin Palmo was probably questioning him more about the bhikshuni ordination, how the nuns could get the full ordination, because that was the issue that a lot of us were working on. But gender equality is broader than that. When I first came to Dharamsala in the mid-70s, the nuns had very little education. They mostly did pujas, chanting, during the day. And I think it was because many people, probably mostly non-Tibetans, went to His Holiness and said, what's the situation with the nuns? How come the monks are getting this education and they're debating and so on, and the nuns aren't? And His Holiness really took that to heart, and he's been the mover and shaker about that. So now the Tibetan nuns can get the whole system of teachings that the monks do, except on the Vinaya, except on the monastic discipline, because the nuns don't have the full ordination, they just have the novice. And a couple of years ago, we had the first geshimas. Yeah, so that was a big achievement. There were 20 nuns who became geshis. And every year since then, there's been more being added. So His Holiness, I think, was really the mover and shaker behind all of that. For the Westerners, it was slightly different because since most of us didn't speak Tibetan, we didn't live in the Tibetan monasteries. And so we had our classes, men and women, together. Yeah, we got the same education. Yeah, so that part was equal. But of course, there's so many other ways where the men get priority and the men are in front, and the men receive more offerings, and the men get more acknowledgement and more opportunity, and so that part is changing slowly. Okay, it's changing, but the thing is, all of this depends on people's minds, and changing people's minds is not easy, you know? You ever tried to change your parents' minds on something they believe? It's as difficult as changing our own mind on something we believe, yeah? So it's going to be slow, yeah? My personal philosophy is learn as much as you can and then create an environment that's equal. Okay? In other words, for example, the Abbey is set up in the West, so we can set it up as gender equal. If we set it up, you know, in Dharamsala, we couldn't set it up that way. It just wouldn't work. Okay?
Is there a cultural aspect to this as well?
Yeah. I mean, in the Tibetan community, what nun starts an institution? Even in the Western community, many Westerners are like, they don't move unless their guru tells them to do something. Yeah? So it so much depends on the individual. Yeah?
Maybe we should stop. Yeah.
I don't know if I answered your question okay. But,
Yes.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely delightful to get those insights and then just watch you interact with them.
But I want to ask Vicki before we close.
Yeah.
What do you think about the whole gender issue?
About
Yeah, what do you think about the whole gender issue in Tibetan Buddhism?
Well, I've been on it for ages. You know, I just couldn't understand it. The reason funnily enough, I mean, Lama Yeshe was so kind of for women and not against men, but he was so pro. And when I finished writing the first book, Reincarnation, it was him who gave me the idea, because I just finished the last full stop. I hadn't really thought about it. I just finished the last full stop of Reincarnation, Boy Lama, and I heard this voice saying, "What about the women, dear? What about the women?" And I thought, I mean, the last thing you want to do when you've just finished a book is actually write another one.
Yes.
You know, it's like having a baby. You just don't actually want to think about it ever again. But it was his thought, and I thought, well, yeah, what about the women? This is interesting. So I began to then think about where are the women, you know, so then I asked Lama Zopa, I was in a sort of fit of pique, and I said to him, well, why aren't there more women up there? Why aren't there more women on the throne? Why don't we have more women, you know, around the place? Why aren't there more women Dalai Lamas? Why haven't there been any women? So he got very wrathful, he said, "What's stopping you, dear?" Which was fair enough. And then he said, actually, if women had appeared before, no one would have heard them, because the culture was such. It was such a patriarchal society all throughout the world. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, the whole lot. It was all masculine. Nobody would have listened or heard her anyway. And I thought, well, he said, when the time is ripe, it's all to do with what you were saying, causes and conditions. When the times change and when things happen, then women will appear. And now, if you think about it, we have so many wonderful women teachers, nuns mostly, within our organization. We have so many wonderful women teachers. So I think it's causes and conditions. So I'm completely onto it. I mean, it just seems normal to me. I mean, just, you know, why not? You know, it's sort of silly.
Have you faced any gender discrimination in your practice?
In my practice,
or in your interactions with the Tibetan community?
no.
Wonderful.
I think I've just barged in. I just don't think I've taken any notes on it. No. No, I haven't.
Good.
But yeah.
I have.
Yeah, I'm sure. but you're a nun. I think it's more difficult, frankly. I found it more useful to be a woman sometimes. It's got me into places, especially in my work. It's got me into places where men couldn't have, because it's been so useful for me being a woman.
Yes. Yeah.
To be frank, Because people, they don't think I'm not, you can get through doors and people just smile at you and you just carry on. So anyway, that's my experience.
Okay, good.
Sorry, but I'm for it completely, obviously.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
It's amazing. We've been going on for 2 hours and we could go on for much longer.
Well, I don't think Venerable Thubten Chodron must be so exhausted.
So I want to invite you both to come back and do it again. That was really a wonderful experience. Thank you to both of you.
Thank you for creating
Thank
the
you very
space and the idea for
the
it.
opportunity. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And tonight, when the tour in the UK, the week, it's barely a week of Venerable Chodron in London was being planned, and we knew she was going to talk at the British Library today, earlier, and so then there was this thought of an event tonight, and I was concerned, it's just too much.
Yeah.
And
I said, let's go, let's
and
do
she
it.
said, no, let's benefit beings. Anyway, and I was very moved by that, by just your non-stop wish to just make the most of your time to benefit beings. And who wants to rest when you want to benefit beings? Of course, that's not how my mind works. So I learned a lot from that. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank all of you
Thank you for coming Saturday night.
Thank you for coming.
And so I just wanted to share a few things as we part. Jamyang Buddhist Centre has an amazing calendar of events, and so I just want to draw your attention to just a few events that are coming. We have the good fortune of having a phenomenal teacher, Geshe Namdak, who's Dutch, was appointed and arrived in June, so he's new to the London community. And because of the talk tonight, there's one event, he's teaching a lot. He's giving, and there's a talk in particular I wanted to draw your attention to because you guys talked about the mind in a really inspiring way. And so on Sunday, 27th of October, it's a whole day long on the world of consciousness. And so, I wanted to draw your attention to that. And then a few more things. Obviously, as many people are aware, Monday, day after tomorrow, in a few days, is the beginning of 2 weeks of activism around the climate crisis here in London and around the world. And so Jamyang is hosting a number of events that are connected to that. And so on Sunday, October 13th in particular, in the morning we have a workshop led by Andy Wistrich on extension rebellion and bodhisattva activism. And then in that evening, Geshe Lakdor, who's a scholar, long-time translator of His Holiness, he was director of the Library of Tibetan Works and Archive, is giving a talk on universal responsibility and the climate crisis. And the tickets are going fast, I'll just tell you that. And so if you're interested, please join us. It's at 6 o'clock. And so it's a leaflet of some of our activities. That's only for October. It's amazing. So thank you all. Be safe, travel home safe, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.